So their internet exploded with the news of the Steam Machine prices and configurations being revealed. I want to detail and kind of break down all of that, but I also want to talk about how the Nintendo Switch 2 and even consoles just overall kind of exposed Valve and what's going on here. Now listen guys, AI crisis, all of that. Trust me, I'm not stupid. I'm going to go over the economics of it and explain to you guys what is happening and why. But we had a lot of people discussing a lot of things, saying certain aspects about the Nintendo Switch 2 being overpriced and this and that. Same thing goes for a lot of other devices out there. But then now here comes Valve doing the exact same thing, if not worse. So we're going to talk about that, kind of how the console market here and even Nintendo Switch 2 exposed Valve at this point and exposed the dirty, I would say, truth about the console market at this point. We also have some big updates to Nintendo Switch 2 titles, exciting stuff with Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, and some big changes when it comes to SEGA after some notable flops in their portfolio. But before we continue, we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 at 140,000 subscribers or on September 1st, whichever comes first. Subscribe, like, comment. The winner will be chosen at random, and it's a worldwide giveaway. Thanks, peeps. Okay, let's just start off with the Steam Machine. We've got the configs and prices. You can sign up for the list before June 25th, 10 a.m. PT, to be in a random order to buy the machine. So you have the 512 gigabyte Steam Machine for $1,049. You have the 512 gigabyte with a controller. The base package of over $1,000 does not come standard with a controller. So just keep that in mind, guys. So if you want the controller, it's $1,128 with the 512 gigabyte model. You have the 2 terabyte model. That's $1,349. That's without a controller. And then if you want the 2 terabyte model with a controller, that's $1,428. Now, on the outside looking in, obviously, super pricey. If you're looking at just what you get, even for over $1,000, you don't get a controller. Now, the thing about it is that the Steam Machine can use a variety of controllers. So if you have a Nintendo Switch 1 controller, Switch 2 controller, PlayStation controller, Xbox controller, that is that. But you would still think that you would just get a controller with it for over $1,000. Now that controller is $100 separate. So if you buy like the 512 gigabyte with the controller, you are getting a little bit of a discount. You're getting like $10 off or something like that, a little bit over $10 off, which is not, I guess, bad. But at the same time, you'd expect, once again, $1,000 plus, or even like $1,349, you'd expect it to come with a controller, but it does not. And if you do some comparisons here, and why I say there's kind of like some exposing going on here when it comes to the console market, you can get a PlayStation 5 and a Nintendo Switch 2 for cheaper when it comes to just the overall amount than the 512 with a controller, or it's like right around the same price. PS5 is $600 for the all digital edition. Nintendo Switch 2 is $450, so it's actually a bit cheaper. Now that price is going up to $500 for the Nintendo Switch 2, but even with that, it's still right around the same price slash maybe a bit cheaper, and you get multiple controllers when it comes to the Switch 2, 2 controllers, Joy-Con split apart, in addition to the PlayStation 5 controller. Or even if you want to go a little bit more on the high end with the 2 terabyte, the PlayStation 5 Pro, which has been maligned and blasted for being too expensive. And I do think it's really pricey and people aren't buying it for that price. I was able to get in at ground level with the $700, and then I bought the external hard drive separately. So I was able to get it for a pretty good price compared to how it is now. But even then, that's $900. And then you can also get a Nintendo Switch 2 for $450. So that right there still is a bit cheaper than the 2 terabyte with the controller. Or if you're just looking at a PS5 Pro by itself, that's also 2 terabytes. You get a controller and that's $900. That's significantly cheaper. Now we saw a lot of Valve and hardcore PC guys pretty much prop up this Steam box to be a console killer, to be something that's going to come out and be very competitive price-wise with the different systems out there, and that is not the case. They were completely wrong because, once again, they did not study what was happening with the economics. Even with the PlayStation 5, we saw an increase in RAM throughout the generation. Asha Sharma confirmed that when it comes to when they first started getting RAM in 2020 and what was happening all the way through to this point. It's been just steadily increasing, and that's why prices are increasing and increasing. Now listen, I'm not trying to justify or just diminish that. Like, listen, it's not good when we get price increases. Nintendo Switch 2 got a price increase, and honestly, it could get another price increase because Furukawa has already came out and stated that the price increase does not cover all of the costs. But right now, if you look at it, Switch 2 is looking like the most affordable when it comes to all the options on what's happening here. And that is a bit of an exposing because there were people that were stating that Steam Deck, in addition to Steam Machine, is going to be what you should get. That should be better buys than getting a console or getting a Nintendo Switch 2, a hybrid. But if you're looking at the math when it comes to how much you're paying for what you're getting, that's not the case at all. That was the whole crux. That was the whole point of their argument, was that. But if you want a Steam Machine, even at the base value of $1,049 plus a Steam Deck, that's also going to run you about 700 and something, 750 to upwards of $900 with tax and all that, depending on what model you get. That's not a great replacement for simply just buying a Nintendo Switch 2, getting the dock already there, getting the controllers and everything all packed in. You don't have to sit there and switch devices. It can be all right there. You don't have to sync up the cloud saves and do all this other type of stuff. And you're going to be able to play a lot of games that are already on Steam and, of course, exclusives on the Switch 2 and be able to do that. So to me, at least, there's definitely some exposing going on here. This seems like a DOA type of machine, a dead on arrival type of machine, in my opinion, at these prices, because once again, we let people know when it comes to the price of certain things. People had a problem with PlayStation 5 Pro. I had a problem with having a premium system for $700 or $750 for the first price increase, or $900 without a disc drive in there. I think that that disc drive should have came in there, and to me that was kind of the scammy thing, making you pay separate for the disc drive, but it is what it is on that. Now, the thing about it is that we're seeing some inconsistencies with some of the media out there with the Steam Machine and kind of what's going on and the reviews. Because IGN, for example, I like IGN. I don't think that they're bad. I like the people that work there. Shout outs to Casey and Brian Altano and Per Snyder. I think that they're great. But there's absolutely some inconsistency when it comes to how their reviews and the scaling, because they would give the PlayStation 5 Pro and they gave the Nintendo Switch 2 lower ratings because of the price. The Switch 2 in particular, they said that the Nintendo Switch 2 is a vital upgrade over the original Switch if that's the only way you've been able to play games for the last 8 years. But improvements that are mostly playing catch up and a big price jump make this sequel system about as exciting as a long overdue phone upgrade in the larger scheme of things. So they're talking about the price, and remember, that's $450. They're talking about that being, oh man, pricey, and it's a big price jump and it's playing catch up. But somehow, when it comes to the Steam Machine, this is what they had to say on that. The Steam Machine at $1,049 is a bit too expensive to take on the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X, but even at the seemingly high price, it's still one of the cheapest and most certainly the easiest way to get into PC gaming right now. And that makes it an easy recommendation. They essentially say, oh, well, if you look at some of the other gaming PCs on the market, it's still really incredible for that price. But the Nintendo Switch 2 somehow does not get that same grace. If you look at all the other handheld PCs or hybrids on the market, price per performance, Switch 2 is actually one of the cheaper ones out there. And it comes, like, once again, with a dock and the controllers all built in with the cables and everything. So how come that wasn't a great entry level or good, handheld or hybrid to get into the market compared to the expensive Lenovo Legion Go's, which were still there last year? So I think that's the problem that some people are seeing with some of these reviews and the inconsistency. IGN even went as far as to say that the ROG Ally is a good value for $1,000, the ROG Ally X, the Xbox one, which is just really weird when you're looking at some of the stuff and kind of like some of the value and all that. I get it, there's different reviewers, but there needs to at least be some type of standard when talking about value if you're going to compare it to other things, because the problem is that some other systems aren't getting that same grace when you're comparison to the other systems on the market and what would be good for entry level or what would be good for what you're getting price per performance wise. So I think that's the issue that I think some people are having when it comes to IGN. They also positioned handheld PCs to be some type of big factor against the Nintendo Switch 2, facing a problem the original didn't, handheld gaming PCs, and they still have not followed up that article after being completely wrong, and essentially, I would say, being very deceptive when it comes to the prices of PC handheld gaming and really how much they've sold in the first place, because we knew about all that and they left all that out of their articles. So I'm going to keep bringing it up until they address it, because they have not addressed it in well over a year now at this point. But I think that's the issue that people are seeing. People are saying that, wait a minute, hold up here. This is not what people were thinking when it comes to the Steam machine and what's happening there. But I do think that the Switch 2 kind of exposed that right now. Those are just my thoughts when it comes to that. And I want to give you guys more thoughts when it comes to Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, because this is one of my most anticipated games of the year. We've got updates on the theming of the world within what's happening here. Shout out to the official Fire Emblem Twitter account that's dropping new information pretty much every week on Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, and Serene's Forest that's doing a great job of translating. So in this one here, we've got the imperial capital, Daggerson, surrounded by a giant lake and central city of the Dagdan Empire with the population of greater than 1 million. There are many facilities, including an arena home to fierce battles, a bustling market, temples for the gods of this land, and prestigious leisure venues. This reminds me of Seattle when it comes to that. Anytime I go to Seattle, it reminds me of that. Maybe they drew some inspiration compared to Nintendo being in Seattle as well. Let's get into the next thing here. The Great Arena, a gigantic arena constructed at the imperial capital, Daggerson. Fierce battles between gladiators take place here day and night, and it's also the grand stage of the Heroic Games, which has recently been announced. And in those Heroic Games, you're going to get a wish if you win the Heroic Games, and that's where the 4 protagonists between Kai, Theodora, Letta, and Dierich all kind of come together and figure out what's happening here. So I'm very excited once again for Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. I've made multiple videos kind of breaking down some of the tech and the performance in addition to the characters and just the, I would say, excitement surrounding this game. I think the biggest thing for me with Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is the fact that it's on the hardware with the Nintendo Switch 2, and a lot of the issues that we saw with Fire Emblem Engage and especially Fire Emblem Three Houses have been sorted out. It looks way better. It animates smooth. The stutter or the performance issues when zooming in from the overview of the map battle into the actual combat segments, that judder has been taken out. You have way more detail in the backgrounds. It's been significantly upgraded over what we saw with Fire Emblem Three Houses. So to me, at least, I think that the audio quality should be significantly better. It's nearly triple the file size of the original game, which was packed into an 11 gigabyte cartridge, which I do think kind of caused them to do some stuff with the graphics to fit everything in. So I feel that everything here with the Nintendo Switch 2 has been able to unlock what Fire Emblem can be on stronger hardware, and I feel that compared to the development time and the amount of content, it's a perfect balance of performance, of visual flair, and content for what you're getting. And I think that this game is going to be one of the best games this year. Drops on September 17th. Cannot wait for it. I'll be playing that day one on the channel. I'll probably do some giveaways and stuff like that for Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. But let's get into what Sega's doing with their plans going forward in the future, because they had a couple notable flops with 2 games, and that's changing their business structure. So Sega says that they plan to shift to influencers after Sonic and Shinobi sales disappoint despite the strong reviews. So in its latest business report, the Japanese publisher highlighted the 2 titles as games that have fallen short of its expectations despite strong reviews from critics and users. Sonic Racing Crossworlds, which sold more than 1 million units at launch, has a Metacritic score of 82 and a user score of 8.6, while Shinobi has a Metacritic score of 87 and a user score of 8.3. Sega said that the underperformance of the 2 titles highlighted a need for the company to update its sales and marketing approach. Notably, Sega plans to globalize its publishing structure and shift its focus from targeted advertising more to fandom, celebrities, and influencers. The company is planning a significant transformation in both organizational structure and mindset towards building and expanding fandom that drives sales. It said, and focusing on the expansion of third-party recommendations, including those from influencers and users. Now, this follows comments from the company earlier this year that it feels it's lagging in initiatives such as digital sales and data-driven marketing, areas in which other big Japanese game makers such as Capcom excel. SEGA said it's currently reviewing its publishing organization, which is divided by region and will transition to a structure with more unified global strategy. Elsewhere in the business report, SEGA says it's planning to release 2 new titles from its flagship IPs by March 31st, 2027, in addition to already announced titles Stranger Than Heaven and Persona 4 Revival. SEGA has recently announced a strong lineup of titles, including Crazy Taxi World Tour, Virtual Fighter Crossroads, Persona 6, Total War Warhammer 40,000, Total War Medieval 3, and Alien Isolation 2. SEGA and the industry veteran Suji Utsumi took over as president in 2024 and has notably put efforts into globalizing the company's development approach following a prolonged period when most of its successes were coming out of Europe. So very interesting, and a lot of corpo speak and jargon kind of mixed in there. But I think ultimately what they're trying to say here is that they're going to move towards more including the fan base and trying to get them very excited about X or Y or Z games. Instead of focusing on maybe more of the media side, they're looking at it from, okay, if we can actually market towards the people that truly love this type of medium and then get them to talk about the games more, we can sell more copies of our games, like Capcom. Now, Capcom has an interesting approach because they do a similar type of thing. Now, I'm not sure if they outright announced it, but Capcom, with their creator program and kind of how they interact with things and their globalization of their brands, I think they're trying to sell like Capcom. I think that they feel like they have the IP that can move like Capcom can, and they can change things around, because Capcom was in trouble about a little bit more than a decade ago or so. Capcom was in big trouble and they were stagnant with a lot of their stuff, and they were able to shift things around with Monster Hunter kind of coming back stronger than ever. They're able to bring like Devil May Cry and other IPs to do really well and completely transform their business. And I think that's what SEGA wants to do with theirs. So we'll see if it works when it comes to SEGA and their lineup coming up here. I think probably the key, for me at least, what SEGA needs to do is they need to get Sonic on track to be a game of the year quality type of game, or a game that reviews or gets close to like a 90 score. If they can take Sonic itself, and not spin-offs like the racing game or anything like that, but the actual main Sonic, and get that up to the ability of being a game of the year candidate, or at least one of those game of the year, it's in the running or people are talking about it like that, I think SEGA can truly change everything, because that's your flagship IP, that's your mascot. Get that up to the level of like a high 80s review score or around that, along with having the influencers and everybody marketing in that type of way. I think that will change so much. But like I said before, this is going to be interesting to see how everything plays out. Obviously, Sonic Racing Crossworlds flopped to them. At least I know it sold over 1 million units, but a lot of that million units plus wasn't really that great because there was discounts all over the place. So they really kind of got cooked by Mario Kart World, but it is what it is on that. So what do you guys think when it comes to everything here, that SEGA and what's going on with the Steam Machine and more? Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, let me know in the comment section below. All right, peeps, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace.